Hello, and welcome to the Science on the 7th live stream, a virtual space where we talk about topics related to air quality and health. I'm your host, Pallavi Pant. Now, many of you may be familiar with our State of Global Air initiative here at the Health Effects Institute, through which we try to provide access to data on air quality and health impacts in countries around the world. We produce reports, we have data visualizations, we have fact sheets, videos, and many more resources available for people to use for their work on air quality. And I'm very excited to share that in about 2 weeks' time, on June 19th, we will be releasing the next version of our State of Global Air report. But what underpins these reports and the data that we provide on the website is a very rigorous analysis that is undertaken by a large group of scientists from around the world. This project, called the Global Burden of Disease Study, is housed at the Institute for Health Metrics Evaluation, the University of Washington, and they look at a whole host of risk factors, including air pollution, and we are then able to use that data and share and communicate it widely. So today, I'm very excited to have a leader within the Global Burden of Disease study and a leader in the field of environmental health. He's currently the principal research scientist at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, and also an affiliate professor at the University of Washington in the US. He leads work on the global burden of disease together with some of his other colleagues. And over the last several years, I've really had the privilege of working with him, learning from him, and I'm very, very happy that he was able to join us this morning. I'd like to welcome Dr. Michael Brauer. Welcome, Mike. We're very pleased to have you here. I think I'm not hearing you yet.
It looks like
I hear you now.
Okay, wonderful to be here. Great to see you.
Thank you. And I know you're, joining us at 7 a.m. your time. So really a big thank you for making that, early call. And let me start by congratulating you. I know the global burden of disease is a major, major effort. You've just launched the results a few weeks ago. So a big congratulations and a thank you. We've all been looking forward to what the new data shows. But for those of us who are listening in and may not be really familiar with global burden of disease, can you tell us a little bit more about it? What is it and what can it tell us?
Yeah, so the global burden of disease is it's a massive project, and it's an ongoing effort. So as you mentioned, we released the GBD 2021, but we're already working on the next iteration, which is GBD 2023. And what it is it's really an attempt to systematically quantify health everywhere around the world, and separated by age, by sex, and by location. So asking questions like, how many people die from stroke in Nigeria? How many people are dying as a result of physical inactivity at age 35, in Russia, right? So really getting into very detailed questions and then doing it in sort of a harmonized fashion so that we can compare like to like and really make these comparisons.
Fantastic. I know that this has been, a major effort, and especially for this round because of COVID, happening in the pandemic, impacting lives of people around the world. This has been a particularly sort of larger effort to try and reconcile what the data tell us. I want to just show people a scale of, what this work looks like. So if we can pull up the image where we see how many people, more than 10,000 people around the world, involved in this work, and then 607 billion. I can't even comprehend, what that would look like. And data for countries around the world, territories around the world, subnational level, national level. So it really is a big, big effort. But that also means this is a lot of information and a lot of data for people to pull through, try and figure out what makes sense and what's relevant for them. So, since we are in the age of social media, can I ask you to give us a quick highlight reel, like the three big things that everyone listening in and everyone using the global burden of disease results should know from this round of results?
Yeah, so wonderful question. So this round, obviously, and I would say unfortunately, we see the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and this has led to the most severe drop in life expectancy that we've seen in the last 50 years. So as we've seen sort of improvements in life expectancy really across the board for the most part, everywhere around the world. And now we saw this drop because of really this devastating pandemic that we all lived through. So that's really one thing. The other thing is, I would say, a uh, continuing understanding that there's been slowing of population growth for most of the world, and almost a complete shift in where we're sort of seeing births in the world. So, most high income countries, we have declining populations. What we would say is below replacement. So, we're not actually having enough kids to sustain those populations. And in low income countries, those are the only parts of the world that where those populations are growing, where we still have younger populations. And this is really going to change the way the world works. If you think about needing individuals to run your economies, where are those individuals going to be in the world as we age in many, many countries of the world? And then I would say the third takeaway is from the sort of work that I focus on, which are these risk factors. So, what is actually causing ill health? And what we're seeing is we've had really great success for many of these risk factors. To things like smoking, we're actually starting to see decreases across the board in smoking and the health benefits of that. Improvements in childhood and maternal malnutrition, and then some environmental things like air pollution from burning solid fuels for cooking, or access to drinking water, access to clean sanitation. The more troubling aspect of that are there some risk factors that are still worsening, and ambient air pollution is one of those. And another sort of group are the things that we call related to sort of metabolic syndrome. So, obesity, diabetes, physical inactivity, and we're going to need to put more attention, more emphasis on those now and into the future.
So some mixed news, I guess. Some sort of successes and wins and areas that we still need to work on. But I imagine in doing all of this work, you probably rely on a lot of different types of data sets and information and estimations. And how does it all come together? I've always been really fascinated by that because I use the numbers. So I see, oh, these are the estimates for the countries and at the global scale, but what's the magic that happens behind the scenes?
Well, I would say there is no magic. There's really a lot of hard work. We work on a set of principles that we really try and stick to. And one is, so we're certainly very collaborative and very, very open. This whole project is seen as a global public good. So we are not creating information that we're holding on to. We're creating information, and we're doing things like what we're doing this morning. We're really trying to disseminate that information as broadly as possible. And at the same time, we're trying to gather information that we use. So we really, one of the things we try and do, we say we use all the available data that's relevant to the question. So this could be surveys, it could be censuses, it could be in high income countries, we have very good quality information, not just on what people are dying from, but even on how many people are going to hospitals for this or that condition, cancer registries, all of that. And now increasingly, we are using, I would say, more advanced information, like for the work that we're doing in environmental risk factors, a lot of satellite-based information. And we're even starting to use satellite-based information to understand where populations are living exactly, which you think is something that we would know, but we really don't know that. We don't know exactly where people are living and where people are migrating to. And again, you can imagine this becomes very important. So it's all kinds of information. Another principle is we feel very strongly that having an estimate is, even if it's uncertain, is better than not having anything at all. So we say we leave no zeros. And along with that, we provide uncertainty. So we say, here's our best estimate, but we really don't know where it's fitting in between this and this. And that really tells us, where we need to get more information, um, where we need to do more research. And then, again, underpinning it all is we're taking all this information and we're trying to sort of fill in these gaps and do things in a harmonized way. There's a lot of modeling that's involved. And that's really the core of what we do and when we do that modeling, we're doing it when we're always checking for validity, we're always updating methods, making things more and more advanced. So every time we actually do a release, we do everything all over again. So we go back to 1990, and every year everything is actually done over again because we've made improvements in the methods. And as I mentioned, as soon as we finish, or even before we finish one round, we're already starting to work on the next round. And I sort of view it more like an IT firm. It's kind of work rather than sort of the traditional academic kind of university work where deadlines, aren't so clear, and we really kind of try and put out products on a regular basis because we know this information is critical and it's being used by a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I can attest to that idea of, we need some estimate, even if there's uncertainty, because I feel like even in the context of air pollution, that I think about all the time, often having a number that people can then react to helps. Because if you had nothing, what would people even react to? So I'm glad you're doing this work. And you know this really well, and I think I kind of understand it. But when we look at these results and the numbers, we often see two major metrics. We see the numbers of deaths or rates of deaths, but also, and importantly, we see a metric that is called DALY, disability adjusted life years. And that's a concept which can be a little hard to explain sometimes. Can you walk us through what it is and why is this an important metric for us to be paying attention to?
Sure. So a DALY, as you mentioned, a disability adjusted life year, in its very simplest form, it's a healthy year of life. And we traditionally think about understanding health in terms of things like death. Won't surprise anybody, but the bad news is we all will die eventually. And so what we tend to think about in death is sort of whether that death comes prematurely. And that's a metric called years of life lost. So what we're saying there is under perfect conditions, and what we actually look at is what population subgroups in the world live the longest, and we compare everybody to that. And so if you're not living to your fullest life expectancy, you have some years of life lost. So that's one component of the DALY. The other, which is the really important one, is the years of life that you're living, but you're living under imperfect health. And actually, everybody lives under some imperfect health. That could be low back pain, that could be even a headache. That's all of those are some measures of suboptimal health. And and what we're actually seeing now, and so the DALY is the sum of those two, the years of life lost and the years of life that you're living, but you're living with some level of disability. And what we're seeing now actually is globally, those years of life with disability are are becoming larger almost everywhere than the years of life lost. So what this is actually, again, a mixed message. We're living longer, which is a success. And we're also seeing a narrowing of even the disparities in how long people are living around the world. There still is disparity, but we're seeing it actually narrowing and likely continuing to narrow so that the best off are going to be more similar to the worst off. But again, at the same time, as we live longer, we want to live longer with a high quality of life, without the chronic conditions that many of us are facing and will continue to face. So that's those years of life with disability. It's really how healthy are you when you're alive.
Thank you so much for sort of describing that, and that sort of brings me to a related question, which is on a lot of people's minds these days, that we're experiencing the impacts of climate change, and we're living through a lot of them now. There was just a major heat wave in South Asian countries, and for 5 6 days, my parents, who were lucky enough to be able to do this, just did not leave their home in air conditioning. But I imagine that's another layer that will increasingly add to this burden, and to how healthy people are and how they're able to live their lives. And GBD, as far as I understand it, has now started including some components of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're already considering, and what might be things that will impact these health estimates in the future?
Sure. So yes, climate change is it's a big deal. It's on everyone's mind, and we are starting to sort of implement it in the GBD in a couple of ways. So one of the things that we've done for a few cycles now is look at the health impacts of extreme temperatures, or actually not even extreme, but what we call non-optimal temperatures. So temperature deviations from sort of the healthiest temperatures, and that's both on the cold side, and in fact, the deaths from cold temperatures are about 3 times greater than the deaths from warm temperatures. Um, and so we're also looking at both of those. And so you could say that's in part climate change, because we're seeing more warmer temperatures, and we're seeing sort of a worsening of the health impacts from the warm temperatures that's not compensated for by a decrease in the cold temperatures. And we can get into there's very specific reasons of why. So we're starting to sort of track that again from 1990 to present. But what we're doing now, one of the things that we are regularly releasing as part of the GBD cycles now are health forecasts. And in this round, we built in 2 climate scenarios. So one that we sort of think is, perhaps a reference scenario, which has some level of continued warming, and one which is a worse, or a better case scenario. So what if we really start reducing emissions related to climate change and sort of arrest the temperature increases that we've seen? So this is a very aggressive, and we can then look at the difference, not just today, but what do we see in the year 2050? What do we see in the year 2100 in terms of health? Taking into account not just what's going on with temperature, but everything else that's going on with health. And that's what's the really interesting part, is many people have done this sort of hypotheticals, understanding, let's say, what a temperature trajectory might mean for health. But we're combining that with actually what do we think health is going to be like. And that, I think, gives us a more accurate view. Of course, this is all the future, so we don't know, but a more accurate projection of what's likely to happen. So we've included both future temperature, but also under those actions to deal with climate change, we know that air pollution will decrease. So if we start decarbonizing, we're going to have less emissions. So we're considering that as well into the future. That's already built into what we've released. But now we're starting to look at things like flooding, malaria, dengue, so some of the vector-borne diseases, um, and also impacts on food security. And very important, what I think is likely to be the biggest impact is how will populations migrate. So we're starting to see places in the world where people are just not able to live there, in part because they're not able to grow foods locally, but also not able to spend any time outside. And we do have examples of that, around the world now. Let's say some of the wealthy countries in the Persian Gulf. Um, but we see how we've adapted to that. We live in air conditioning now. Large populations, for example, in the Sahel in Africa are not going to be able to afford to live like that. So what's going to happen to those populations? And we think they will be migrating, and where they're going to go, what countries are going to be receiving these migrants. So really trying to understand that, and that's extremely challenging, to first actually understand where people are and where they're likely to go.
Fascinating. And I think also, just it's nice to hear that you're thinking about all of those different pieces, which undoubtedly are going to work together to give us a glimpse of what lies ahead. And just thinking about, coming back to air pollution and in the context of climate change, there have been increasing calls for thinking about air pollution and climate change in sort of an integrated manner. The health argument for dealing with air pollution problems has also been at the forefront, in part because of the types of estimates that are available through GBD and other tools. But one question that I get a lot, and I'm pretty certain you do too, is there's the GBD estimates and there's the WHO estimates. And I think I have a figure which is a few years old now, but illustrates a little bit how there's a lot of different answers on how many people die from air pollution each year, how many deaths occur. And I would love to get your perspective on, these variations. Some of them are really science driven, just sort of what we know and don't know, what we include and not include. But I would love to hear your perspective on what you think about these differences in the overall estimates, and also, despite some of these differences, how can people still use all of this available information to make the case that they might want to make in their city, in their town, in their country on the need for action on air pollution?
Yeah, thanks for that question. As you mentioned, it is one that we get a lot. But I've actually seen a little bit of a shift in sort of understanding. So I think that the take home from all of this is that regardless of the number that you look at, the health impacts from air pollution are large. It is, by far, not, it's not even a close race, by far the largest environmental risk factor for health. And I've just been doing a little bit of work actually trying to sort of make some rough estimates from, let's say, climate change, from other things that we're not including fully now. And I don't think that picture is going to change at all. So air pollution, it's air pollution, air pollution, air pollution in terms of environmental factors, even in an era of climate change. And actually, that's sort of good news, because as you know, we know how to deal with air pollution. We've seen successes. And so it's not kind of rocket science. It's really, there's tried and true ways to sort of deal with air pollution. Even sort of newer forms of air pollution like wildfire smoke, that we're coming to grapple with now, especially in the part of the world where I live. So why are these estimates different? Well, partly it's, so maybe just to take a step back, how do we come up with these numbers? So we need basically three things. One is how much are people exposed to? and we need to know what the relationship is between a level of exposure and a given disease. And then we need to know the levels of disease in the population. Essentially, that's what we do. Now, when I started doing this, there was a lot of discussion about how we're going to estimate exposure. And I would say, fortunately, now that's fairly well harmonized, that most people are using satellite-based estimates in combination with ground monitoring efforts. And the satellites really help us fill in all those gaps. And the ground monitors sort of calibrate it all for us. And we're more or less using the same kind of approaches with that. That's been a huge advance. It's something that, I really, really pushed for, kind of going way back, like, 15 years ago. We needed that. The second piece, and really, I think this is the most important where we're getting at differences, is actually what diseases are we including? So we try and update. So this last cycle, GBD 2019, we added diabetes and air pollution. We added maternal, so pregnancy outcomes. For example, the WHO outcomes estimates don't include those. And some of the other ones don't. This cycle, we've added nitrogen dioxide and asthma. Next cycle, we're going to be looking at particulate matter and dementia. We're going to be adding that. So these things are sort of at different stages. And then also that underlying diseases, people are using sort of different estimates, and even in some cases using different exposure response relationships, depending on whether you're doing it sort of disease specific, or like we do, or looking at all cause of mortality. And we can get into the details of that, but those are some of the reasons for the differences.
Thank you for explaining that. And I think also for that central message that estimates vary, but the bottom line remains the same. They all tell us it's a big disease burden, so we really need to act on it. I think this was excellent hearing about GBD, and I have so many more questions that I could ask you. But also, I'm always interested in how people's careers were shaped. And throughout your career, you've worked on so many different topics, and with researchers, with the international community, with practitioners and others. Can you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and how you got interested in this space and what it's been like working on these issues?
Yeah, great question, and one I really like to answer. So I actually started out, I thought I wanted to be a science journalist, and started talking to journalists, and they sort of said, you any good at this science stuff? And I said, yeah, I'm okay. And they said, well, stick with that, and it's kind of come a little bit sort of full circle. So I got involved and, was always interested in environment and health, and actually started out really being interested at sort of the molecular level. And that was kind of fascinating science, but hard to sort of think about what that meant in the big picture. And that's where I sort of got into epidemiology and did many, many years, and still do these studies of, this level of exposure to whatever air pollution or green space or noise is linked to this level of disease. And those studies are still very important. That's how we generate new knowledge. But I was frustrated that we were kind of continuing to say, okay, air pollution's bad for you. It's bad for you. It's bad for you. But actually, I couldn't really say how bad. I couldn't say how bad is it relative to a diet, high in sugar, or relative to smoking. And that's where the work with the GBD came in. It's really about translating that into numbers that are meaningful for policy. And that kind of comes back to what I initially wanted to do. Why did I want to do science journalism? It wasn't so much because I love the science, it was because I wanted to actually work on hopefully improving the environment, improving health. And this is what I hope we're doing with the GBD, is giving governments, individuals that information that can improve lives for everyone.
That is amazing, and I'm really glad to hear sort of, this transition from being interested in journalism to this, because I feel like you have really hit that mark of making the right kinds of information available to people. Looking ahead, what gives you hope for where we are headed scientifically, but also as a world looking at these data that you have been so involved in producing?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna like reference a book that I encourage everybody to read called Not the End of the World by Hannah Ritchie. And it really speaks to data. And if you look at the data, there's a lot of good news. And there's all kinds of reasons why, many of my friends at NGOs, many of my friends in the media will share bad news, but there's a lot of good news and we just have to look for it. And when we look for something like air pollution, we can see good news. Household air pollution, there's been dramatic improvements. We've seen improvements in air pollution. Again, unfinished business, absolutely. There's lots more we need to do, but the trends are going in the right direction. People are living longer. We're starting to see, decreases in air pollution in China. We're starting to see probably a plateau of air pollution in South Asia where it's going to start to improve. So there's lots of good news. Um, and that's, it's really about accelerating that good news and reminding people that the sky is not falling. Even, with climate change, again, it's a serious problem. Um, but when we start to look at the health impacts, I don't see the end of the world at all. And it's a matter of, how quickly are we going to adapt and how much pain are we going to go through before we make the changes that we know we have to make. So that's what gives me hope.
Fantastic. That gives me reassurance, Mike, and I think I agree with you. There is a lot of positive science around us, despite all of the problems that we have to tackle still. And really, what I'm taking away from this conversation is a hope. We've seen progress on many fronts in our health, in the environment around us that we live in, and that we still need to keep making progress. We're not done yet. So thank you so very much for taking the time to join us. We've really appreciated talking to you. And again, congratulations for getting the GBD data out. I'm excited for us to put out the state of global air next. And thank you for all of the engagement and collaboration on that. And looking forward to GBD 2023. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Everyone listening in, thank you very much as well. Don't forget to set your reminders for Monday, July 8th, when we will be back and we will speak with Dr. Mark Miller about a new report that the World Heart Federation has released talking about heart health, cardiovascular health, and air pollution. And if you have ideas for topics and guests, please, as always, get in touch and stay tuned for the State of Global Air report that gets out on June 19th. We'll also host a webinar where you will hear from Mike and others on June 27th. So we hope to see you there as well. Thank you very much.